You can change your gene expression in 4 days. Genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors, genes for oxidative balance at any age. 4 very common things. First thing is that most people believe that there was an intelligence that lived within them, not outside of them, that was a resource if they could connect to it, just like I did, and begin to allow it to help them heal. It would be important. There's nothing mystical about this intelligence. Some people had a religious take on it, some people just a spiritual take, some people were just pragmatists that they just trusted, the whole way. The second thing was that on some level they thought that they had contributed or they were responsible for their own health condition. That the 10 years of living in stress, and living in stress is living in survival, and stress, as you know, knocks the brain and body out of balance. And it's a scientific fact that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease. People spend 70% of their life living in survival, living in stress, and no organism can live in emergency mode for that amount of time. Certain emotions that we feel when we react to people or conditions in our lives, that emergency state, the arousal of the brain and body, drives us to live very primitive behaviors. And they became aware that they had to stop being that person. That's a very important thing. They had to break the habit of being themselves. And that's significant because they're not relying on now any drug, even though they're treating with drug or treatment or surgery, they're all of a sudden taking more responsibility of paying attention to how they think, noticing how they act or how they speak, or looking at how they feel, and stop blaming somebody from 20 years ago. That they just decided that they had to make the changes. So they had to break the habit of being themselves. Third thing I thought was so fascinating was that they had to reinvent themselves. And they started thinking, well, God, if I had a chance, another shot at life, who would I be? And there's this concept in neuroscience called mental rehearsal. And when you close your eyes and you plan an action, or you rehearse mentally what you're about to do, if you're truly present, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here, that the imagery that you're creating, the brain captures as an experience. So then the experience begins to enrich the brain, so they, over time, began to install the neurological hardware in their brain, the platform of who they would become. And as they started doing that, and they started overcoming fear or anger or hostility or pain or suffering, they started getting happy. And they started feeling these heartfelt emotions of freedom and gratitude for no reason. And I think that when they started feeling that feeling independent of what was going on in their life, in other words, they weren't waiting for their healing to happen so they could feel grateful. Gratitude is the ultimate state of receiving. I mean, when you receive something, where you've just received something, or something's happening to you, or something's happened to you, you feel gratitude, you say thank you. Well, the body, as the unconscious mind, it doesn't know the difference between an experience that creates an emotion, an emotion that you're fabricating by thought alone. So the body starts to feel gratitude. It's believing it's in the actual experience of being healed. And the research shows, Chris, that the environment signals the gene. And the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So then you can signal genes ahead of the environment if you begin to embrace emotions before the experience. And genes begin to make proteins, and proteins give you the expression of life. This is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. When people start scratching their head and saying, you mean my genes don't create disease, and you can say to them less than 1% of the people on the planet are born with a genetic condition. The other 99 to 95% are lifestyle behaviors. If you want to have people become reliant on something outside of them to take away what's going on inside of them, you'll advertise. People will say, I need this drug, I need something outside of me to change my internal states. That's profits, that's money. So it's a crazy thing when people start, evidence is the loudest voice. We have studies to show that you can change your gene expression in 4 days. Genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors. Genes to grow new neurons in the brain, not just new connections, but new neurons. Genes for oxidative balance. At any age, we randomly selected a group of people, and we had them think differently, make different choices, do different things, create new experiences, and feel new emotions. 4 days. They regulated 8 genes in common that literally would change their health. Your body is a protein-producing machine, and every cell in your body makes proteins except for red blood cells. And in order for a cell to make a protein, a gene has to be regulated. So then genes are like Christmas tree lights. They're switching on and off all the time, and when they switch on, they upregulate and they make a healthy protein. When they switch off, they downregulate and they make a cheaper protein. So then, if you're thinking the same way, making the same choices, doing the exact same things in routine and the same habits, doing the same things that create the same experiences, that create the same feelings, you got the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off. Same Christmas tree lights on, the other one's off. Now you're headed for a genetic destiny. We don't see things how they are, we see things how we are. And if you don't know that you have control over your genes, then it never crosses your mind. So then the other part of that is that when a person's living by the same feeling and the same emotion every single day, and those emotions are influencing the way they think and the way they act, and they can't think greater than how they feel, or they can't act greater than how they feel, and feelings and emotions are a record of the past, they're in a program of the past, right? So the body, again, now is believing it's in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and now you're down-regulating a gene. So then if you have a propensity for Alzheimer's, if you have propensity for heart disease, if your family has a propensity for cancer, or ulcerative colitis or MS or whatever, then of course it makes sense then that if you're living in the reactions of fear and anger and hostility and envy and jealousy, resentment and pain and suffering, it's those very emotions that select and instruct genes. So then a person who's living, reacting to the same people in the same way, same circumstances in the same way, they keep knocking on the same genetic door. And so sooner or later, once that gene is signaled, now all of a sudden the cell is programmed to begin to make a cheaper protein. So the question is, can you reverse that process? Well, if it took you 5 years to create the health condition, you may have to work a little bit to reverse it. But yet, we're getting so good at measuring and being able to teach people how to do this that it's not uncommon that we see people have a complete remission of a health condition in 1 week in a week-long workshop that we have. Because they understand then they're going to be the governor or the ruler of their own thoughts and feelings, and they'll go through a period where they feel really uncomfortable. That's because you're in the midst of change. But they're willing to do it as long as they understand that if they keep changing the way they think, act, and feel, there should be biological changes that take place in the body, and that's exactly what we